Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to the Hudson Institute. To begin our program, it is a great pleasure to invite our Vice President, John Walters, for his welcoming remarks. John?
Thank you, Jaime. I welcome you to the Betsy and Wally Stern Policy Center here at Hudson Institute. I couldn't be more pleased to be able to thank Ambassador Daremblum for setting up this program. He'll introduce our speaker, and I don't want to take much time from the event, but I want to just note that this event is part of the continuing series that Ambassador Daremblum has allowed us to present about important issues and important allies in our own neighborhood. We spend an awful lot of time in Washington talking sometimes about our enemies and sometimes about our frenemies and sometimes neglect our friends and those who are they're struggling with their own problems and where we can be better neighbors if we understand them better. So I want to thank my colleague, Ambassador Jaime Daremblum, for allowing us to put a series together on some of those topics and issues. I also think the coverage in Washington think tankdom is sometimes a little lacking and a little one-sided. Let me also just say, because while many of you know Ambassador Daremblum well, some of you don't, and this is streaming out on the internet to others that are probably not as familiar with his work. Ambassador Daremblum is a senior fellow here at Hudson. He's also director of our Center for Latin American Studies. He is a scholar of Latin America in international politics and international economics. He joined Hudson as a senior fellow and director of the Center for Latin American Studies in 2005. He served as ambassador of Costa Rica to the United States from 1998 to 2004. Prior to assuming his post as ambassador, he was a professor at several distinguished institutions. He practiced law. He was a foreign policy advisor. He has written a number of books and many, many articles, and I'm pleased to say that he's still writing now, as well as directing this center on Latin American politics and economics. He's also testified multiple times before the U.S. Congress and helped to better understand U.S. and Latin American relations in a number of dimensions. I've worked with him on both economics, foreign affairs, and for my old past government service on the issue of illegal drugs and transnational crime. He's able to talk in a way that helps people here understand people in the hemisphere that they don't get to see and don't think about enough, as I say. He has spoken at numerous international meetings, and I'm pleased to say that he'll help direct our program today. I won't take any more of his time and that of our distinguished speaker. I'll let him introduce him at this time. But thank you, Jaime, for this.
Thank you, John. You have been a great friend and big support to our Latin American program. Thank you. Brazil is a country that will always remain very close to me. I spent my early years at the International Monetary Fund as the desk officer for Brazil. After nearly 4 years in that position, on innumerable missions and technical visits and discussions with Brazilian officials, I learned to understand better and love this special country. Of course, that was a long time ago, longer than I would like to admit. But getting to know and work with Roberto Campos, Delfim Neto, and other luminaries of Brazil's return to democratic life was worthwhile. Today, many defining things are happening in that great nation. For a better understanding of current developments in Brazil, we have invited the best of Brazilian diplomacy. My dear former colleague as ambassador to the United States, and always a dear friend, Ambassador Rubens Barbosa, nobody better for this task. And without any further ado, I invite him to the podium for his learned words. Please.
Here it's more informal. Well, good morning, and I'm very pleased to be back to Washington and speak here on Brazil. I see a few familiar friends of my time here. Was very happy here. Good experience in this capital. Back in Brazil now, I do a few things there, and keep coming to Washington and meeting friends here. I was asked to speak on what's happening in Brazil this year and next year. I'll try to give a few glimpses of what is happening there, and I'll concentrate also on the election that's coming in 2018. In 25 minutes, it will be very difficult to try to concentrate a whole host of events that are taking place there. I decided to select 4 or 5 points, and then, if you wish, we could debate on other aspects. On the political scene, I will concentrate on political scene and in the economy. First in 2017, what is happening today? But I think that for those who are not very familiar with the Brazilian situation, the background of everything that is happening in Brazil was the 13 years in which the Workers' Party was in government there. For 13 years, Lula and then Dilma Rousseff managed or mismanaged the country, as I see it, in a very incompetent way, with wrong policies, as we see now, corruption, and it was a very ideological period in Brazil. And the result of these 13 years is the most serious crisis that Brazil has ever faced in history. We have 3 crises, simultaneous crises, interacting one over the other. A political crisis, an economic crisis, and an ethical crisis. On top of that, we had last year, in 2016, the impeachment of the president. And this generated a number of uncertainties, as you can imagine. So whatever I will say here, you have to bear in mind this background. It's not out of the blue. It was 13 years of a party in government that did everything, in my view, contrary to our national interest, defending an ideological cause and making associations with foreign countries ideologically, whatever. So this is the background. Last year, as I said, we had the impeachment. There was a serious threat of institutional crisis. We overcame that. And we reached 2017. This year, in the political area, the scenario is, again, uncertainties. The first point I should stress is that despite of a president that has the lowest popularity in history in Brazil, despite the crisis in the Congress, the lack of political parties with clear programs, despite of the crisis in the economy, despite of the corruption and all the testimony that are being given is exposing politicians, because despite of everything, we are approving fundamental reforms. Surprisingly, we are moving ahead like never before. We approved, for Latin American standards, this is important, we approved a ceiling for the expenditure, the government expenditure. We approved an education reform. We approved a legislation to correct some questions that were raised in relation to the state-owned companies. There is a number of measures, and we are discussing today, social security reform, a labor reform, and at the end, towards the end of the year, we're going to discuss a fiscal reform, a tax reform, and a political reform. It is a very unusual situation. The country in the political area in a very bad shape, very difficult questions all over, and the Congress approving reforms that other countries had to approve during dictatorships. We are in a democracy, we're doing a free discussion. There are huge opposition from the workers, from the unions, huge opposition in some parties, but the problem is managing to approve them. Why? What you can say that explains the situation? My interpretation is that the president who succeeded Dilma Rousseff after the impeachment is a very able politician. He has been 3 times Speaker of the House in the past. And he has been for 15 years leader, president. In Brazil is different from here. A politician is the chief, the head of a party in Brazil. And he has been for 15 years president of the PMDB, who is the centrist, the largest party in Brazil. So the events put him in a position that he had no alternative. He had 2 years from mid-16 to October 18. It's an interim government. He will complete the term, Dilma Rousseff term. And he decided that he's not going to run in 2018, and he had no option. Either he approved those reforms and would begin the modernization of the country, or he would fail completely. And if he approves those reforms, and as I said, the labor reform has been approved in the lower house and will be approved, I think, in the Senate. And the Social Security will be voted towards the end of the month, and I think it will be approved. If he approves those 2 reforms, plus the tax reform and plus the political reform, he will go in history as one of the most successful presidents in the history, with all this mess that in the political scene. So this is one feature of the political scene. A second point is the corruption and all the investigation done by the Attorney General and the lawyers, and this is affecting politicians, affecting businessmen. And I like to say that from the Brazilian point of view, this is an asset. It's not a liability to Brazil, because few countries have put in jail the Speaker of the House, very important ministers, José Dirceu, Palocci, very important ministers from the Lula's period, the most important businessman, the head of Odebrecht, and a number of others at all levels. So this means that the institutions are working. The judiciary has the last word. The attorneys, the Attorney General and others, are doing their job. The Congress is respecting those decisions, and the country assists every day new facts that are unveiled by these testimonies that are given. And I sincerely think that this will change the country, because I think that the dose was too much. Countries have, at a lower level, petty corruption, but at the scale that Odebrecht managed to discuss with the government, and the kind of organization that they put together, the government and Odebrecht and other building companies, had no parallel in Brazil, and not in our region. I don't think that the scale was so huge. So this Lava Jato, as we call there, and the money involved, for you to have an idea, just one example. Not the president of Petrobras or a director of Petrobras, a manager of Petrobras decided to give back to the government $100 million that he had abroad. A manager. You imagine the scale, only in Petrobras. And the government is cashing a big amount of money. So this is a factor that will change the approach to corruption in Brazil. A fourth aspect in political terms is the situation of Lula and Dilma. As you know, the Workers' Party is well organized, and they started a campaign abroad and in Brazil, saying that what happened last year with the impeachment was a coup d'etat. It was a golpe, as we say there, and this is an illegitimate government. And now with these testimonies, they are denying everything. But the amount of evidence that is being brought to the attention of the attorneys and the judiciary is huge. I don't know what's going to happen, but probably the two of them will be indicted, and they will say abroad that they are saying already that José Dirceu, Palocci, the former head of staff and the former finance minister, they are political prisoners. There's nothing of the sort. No, they are crooks. No, I mean, but there's a rhetoric that is going up to the election. I'll talk about that. So it remains to be seen how will be the public reaction to what happens to Lula and Dilma. As of today, this last few months, 2 or 3 months, the divide in the country has increased, the rhetoric has increased, and the radicalization in the country has increased. Brazil is not the only case. Now you have this here in the States, you have in France, you have in other countries, but we never had a situation like that. Politics in Brazil was less tough as it is now. And in Brazil, the Workers' Party coined an expression, we and them, we and them. And this we and them has serious implications, including within the families, among friends. It's amazing what is happening. This is another characteristic of what's happening. But the institutions, as I said, are working. And finally, I think that from the political point of view, what deserves to be watched is, in the coming months, the beginning of the discussion of the election. And I'll mention this later. This is the political scene. The economy is a different situation. Brazil, as I said, until today, has experienced the greatest recession in our history. For you to have an idea, in the last 2 years, we had 7 percentage points of GDP, 7 points of GDP less, 3.5 last year and 3.5 in 2015. Since 2014, the income per capita was reduced by 9%, the income per capita. So, as you can imagine, after 3 years of recession, the pessimism and the lack of investment, the effect on the economy was huge. Unemployment reached 12%, 12 million people, over 12 million, 13 million people unemployed. So it was a huge. It had a huge impact. The bad policies, the mismanagement of the economy, corruption, created this huge recession, the largest in our history. Now, with the reforms, the expectation is improving. There is a very slow reaction in the economy. This year, according to economists, banks, analysis, the idea is that we will grow around 0.5%, between 0.5% and 1%. And I am also work for I'm head of the Council on Foreign Trade of the Federation of Industries in Brazil. And I follow the private sector very, very closely. And this is the expectation, between 0.5% and 1%. But there is one premise, that the reforms are approved. If you see in the papers, if the Social Security reform and the labor reform are approved towards the end of this month, then I think the situation will change dramatically, because the expectation abroad is that those reforms will be approved. And our expectation is that they will be approved. If they are not approved, then it's the end of the government. Will go in another phase of this economic uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen. But if they are approved, I think that we will be in the right path, and these macroeconomic reforms will be followed by microeconomic reforms, small reforms to change the business environment, to facilitate the work of companies there, and this will be helped as well by the political reform, which will help the election period with clear rules in relation to the political parties, in relation to the financing of the campaign. For you to have an idea, this year, as I said, the economy will grow between 0.5% and 1%. Inflation is the lowest in 7 or 8 years, is 4%, is below the target. We have an inflation target system in Brazil. It's below the target, will be around 4%. Interest rates are declining. The expectation is that in the next meeting of the committee in charge of fixing the rate, the interest rate will be over 1%, 1.25%. The expectation is that up to the end of the year, interest rates in Brazil will be around 8%. If you have an inflation of 4%, you will have a real interest rate of around 4%, which is the lowest in many years in Brazil. This will stimulate the growth of the economy, investment from the private sector. The exchange rate will be, as it is today, around 3.3% reais to the dollar. Investment this year, like, it's amazing. This is another feature. Despite everything that I described to you, investment, Brazil is one of the 3 or 4 largest recipients of investment. Last year, over $86 billion. This year, around $60 billion. So it's amazing, but it's like that. It's a big country. Brazil is one of the 10 largest countries. So the interest in the domestic market is huge, despite everything that is happening. And the unemployment, as I said, is very high, and the expectation is that if everything that I described here happens, the reforms are approved, the interest rates, inflation becomes as they are now, the economy will stabilize, and unemployment will begin to decrease beginning of next year, in an electoral year, which is good. So if we approve those reforms, Brazil will come to the election, and the next government will receive a country much more stabilized, a modern country, much more prepared to face the challenges. The difficulties will continue because after 13 years of mismanagement, to correct and to stabilize the economy will take more time. This is normal. It's not a one shot. No, this is a program, because the fiscal deficit, the expenditure of the government, the debt by the government is huge. It's today in April was 72% of GDP. It's very high, and this has to decline. And we're doing other things. No, Brazil is going to join the OECD, which is an important step forward. No, we could not think about this in the Workers' Party rule. We are going to start negotiations with other countries in terms of agreements. For you to have an idea, as Brazil was managed and was closed, in the last 15 years, over 400 agreements were negotiated in the WTO, the World Trade Organization. Mercosur and Brazil, 3. So now the government is saying that it is prepared to negotiate with Japan, with Korea, with Canada. We are in the middle of a negotiation with the European Union, which is supposedly to be signed next year. So it's a completely different situation in the economy. What are the prospects for 2018? I think that as of today, it's very difficult to forecast both in the economy and in the political area what's going to happen in 2018. As I said, if everything, if those reforms are approved, Brazil will be better prepared to the election and to the coming government. The expectation is that next year Brazil will grow at least 2.5%. If you imagine that last year we had negative growth, 3.5%, and we think that we'll be growing 0.5%. To do this, in the last quarter of the year, Brazil should be growing at 2.5%. So we'll get into 2018 growing already 2.5%, which is a completely different scenario. Inflation will be the same thing, about 4.3%. Interest rate will be, as I said, around 8%. Unemployment will start declining. As far as the corruption is concerned, next year will be a crucial year, because some of the trials will be held this year, but the decision will be announced next year in most of the countries. So will coincide with the election. There is and there will be next year as well a huge reaction from vested interests. The civil servants, the military, I mean, all the corporate interests, local interests in the police, and the special interests will be opposing the reforms. But I think they will continue next year. I think that the external situation, the scenario, foreign scenario, with the improvement of the developed economies, with the emerging countries improving as well, will help, but in a small way, because Brazil is not fully integrated in the world economy. It depends on the price of the commodities, a number of factors. And then we'll come to the election. 2018 will be an election year. Election will be in October. And as I said, at the end of this year, towards the end of this year and the beginning of next year, the names will emerge. And we are facing, given the devastation in the political area of politicians by Lava Jato, by the corruption, we don't know who will survive to be candidate in the election. We have in several parties these difficulties. I think that the lack of leadership that we see among governors, among senators, among MPs, representatives, will play an important role. We have an emerging group, the evangelicals, the religious people, that I think will have a candidate. But I don't think that our political systems allows an outsider. It's very difficult, because in Brazil you have to be registered in a party to be a candidate. And the party structure is so closed that it's difficult for an outsider to manage to convince the party that he should be the candidate. Small parties don't have what in our system. There is a TV programs paid by the state and by the parties. And there's no space for small parties. The time allocated to the parties depending on the representation in the Congress. So the small parties have very small, limited period of time, and someone that is not known in the country. Brazil is as large as the United States, is very diverse. It's impossible to someone unknown to be known in the whole country in a short period of time. And I don't think that that Moro, the attorney that is leading the investigation there, or a former judge, Barbosa, Joaquim Barbosa, will present. They are personalities, they are very well known, but I don't think that they will present themselves. So we'll have the traditional parties, the Social Democratic Party, the PMDB, the Workers' Party, the Marina Silva, the Green candidate. You have a rightist guy, a representative called Bolsonaro. You have someone from the evangelicals. But I think that the election will be reduced. You have 7 or 8 candidates, but will be reduced to 2 candidates. Someone who will support the current agenda will continue to deepen the reforms and will continue to try to stabilize the country in the coming government. And someone who opposes that. And I don't think that Lula will be the candidate. He wants to be, but he is very, very much involved in all these scandals, and probably he will be condemned before the election, and he will not be, according to our legislation, present himself as a candidate. And the probable candidate of the opposition will be a former finance minister and a former governor of Ceará, one of the northern states, called Ciro Gomes. He will probably be the opposition candidate with the support of the Workers' Party. And we'll see what happens. If Ciro Gomes or Lula, if they win the election, I think that they will try to change most of the things that have been approved so far. And I think that this will lead us in the coming 5-10 years to a situation very similar to Greece. Because in the case of Greece, the European Union paid the salaries, paid the pensions. In our case, nobody will pay the costs of as we see in Rio de Janeiro. Right? Rio de Janeiro is already a Greece state. It's very similar to what is happening in Greece. So I think just to finish, I think that the coming presidential election will be a watershed in our political history. This election will decide the future of 10, 15, 20, 30 years in our history. Because either we continue with the program of liberalization, the reforms, modernization of the state, reduce the role of the state, or we'll go in another direction, leading to a closed country, a protectionist country, leading to wrong domestic economic policies, and who knows what's going to happen. So I think that the population in Brazil so far is not aware of this dual situation. But I think that as the election approaches, this will be discussed and will be perceived by the population in a more realistic way, because the Workers' Party now has diminished. The Workers' Party became a regional party in the Northeast, the poorer area of the country. But the middle class in the southern part of the country has abandoned completely the Workers' Party, and in my view, Lula or the candidates he supports will have difficulty to win the election, but nobody knows, and we'll see what happens. So I'll stop here and wait for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador, for a very complete and very clear presentation of yesterday and today in your beautiful country. We're going to start now a period of questions and answers. And I have just, I'll attribute myself the authority to ask the first question since I'm sitting here. You mentioned Lula as a potential winner or a potential candidate, successful candidate in the presidency. Isn't he prevented from that because of the penal code or the legislation?
Not yet. He declared that he wants to be a candidate. But according to our rules, if he is trialed and is condemned, then in Brazil is a very complicated system. There is a first condemnation, then there is appeal, and if there is another decision against him, then he will be banned from the elections. But this will take place only beginning of next year. So he is now free to be a candidate. And he's saying that he wants to be a candidate. But probably I think that according to our legislation, he will be prevented to be a candidate because he will be, in my view, indicted and condemned by the courts there.
I see.
For a number of reasons. There are 4 or 5 cases against him.
Well, we'll begin from right to left. On this occasion, we'll alternate between the two spheres. And I would appreciate that you give us, before asking the question, your name and affiliation, and then proceed to ask the question.
Thank you, Ambassador. My name is Tim Rideout, non-resident fellow at the German Marshall Fund. I was wondering if you have any predictions or, forecasts, because it's hard to predict things these days, about whether PMDB will field a candidate for president, and also maybe explain a little bit why they haven't in the past, and if you have any predictions on who PSDB will put forward or who you think will end up. Thanks.
PSDB, not PMDB, PSDB.
Well,
Both. No, I don't think that the PMDB, the party of the current president, that that they will present a candidate. They don't have someone strong enough politically to be a candidate. I think that PMDB will support someone from the PSDB. And from the PSDB, the 3 leading potential candidates, now Aécio Neves, the head of the party, José Serra, the former foreign minister, and the current governor of São Paulo, they were mentioned in receiving money for the campaign illegally. The question of financing of campaigns is a problem everywhere, as you know. In Brazil, in the last few years, given this cohabitation between the Workers' Party and the government, there was our legislation allowed companies to give money to the political campaign. To a certain limit. what happened was that when the companies passed the limit over, pass over the limit, they gave money illegally, not disclosing the money given. And this is now one of the objects of the investigation. Money not legally declared to the campaigns. And on top of that, there was a problem of corruption because Odebrecht and others, they overcharged the public works they did, and the difference they passed to the parties, and this was not could not be declared. So it's a very complex system, and the three of them, IS, USER, and Alchemy, were mentioned, and we'll have to see. None of them have been already declared, that the investigation is taking place. None of them so far. But I think that out of the three, Alchemy, what we know from press reports is less serious than the two others. So it remains to be seen. If Alchemy is not allowed to run, one that is being tipped to be the candidate is the current mayor of São Paulo, João Doria. He belongs to the PSDB, and but this is only speculation so far. But this is the situation. The PMDB will not have a candidate, and the Social Democracy will have one candidate that we don't know who will be up to now.
Ladies first, always.
My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm with Georgetown University, and great to see you after a very long time. That's right. You've mentioned reforms, but we don't hear much in the media or the discussion, at least here, about political party reform. Reforms that would limit the number of little parties that make it so difficult to form a coalition and hold it in the Congress. What discussion is there? And because you work with Fiesp, what is the posture and the voice of the private sector in terms of the kind of economic reforms that would facilitate Brazil's greater integration to the global economy?
Well, as far as the political reform, I made reference to political reforms. I didn't get into the specifics, but the political reform is being discussed in the Senate, is well advanced, and I think that it will be approved up to September. And it will include the reduction of the number of the parties, the small parties. For you to have an idea, Brazil has today 35 political parties registered. There are 10 or 11 parties with representation in the Congress. It's very difficult the political decision process is very difficult because of this pulverization of the parties. So I think that the political reform will include the reduction of the number of the parties, will include a decision on the financing of the campaign, since the legislation ban now the contributions of private companies to the campaign. The government will have to put money. Here in the States, I think part of the cost is covered by the government as well here, and in Europe, part, not all. No, I think there is some money from the government. In Brazil, most of the money will come from the government. financing, number of parties. Coalition will be also banned, because in our system, crazy system, if you are a public figure, you are elected with 1 million votes, you can, there is a coefficient that to be elected. And if you have the coefficient, let's say it's 250,000, if you have 1 million votes, you elect three other people that may be from other parties. It's a crazy system. This is going to change as well. I mean, I think that it's beginning. All these reforms I'm referring to here are the beginning. In Brazil, those reforms have never been discussed in the last 20 years. Reforms were discussed with Cardoso. After Cardoso left, nobody dared to discuss these reforms. Now, we are not only discussing, but trying to approve them. It's a big difference. As far as the private sector is very much in favor of this reform. The labor reform, it was very much criticized by the, I don't know how to say in English, the terceirização, I don't know how to say this. Companies may hire outsourcing labor, and this will help the workers and will help the companies. The companies were very favorable at all levels. They are in favor of the political reform. They are in favor of the labor reform, and they are also in favor of the political reform because this will help to diminish the number of cases brought to the attention of the justice. In Brazil, we have another different thing. We have a labor justice. You have courts to judge cases between workers and companies. And for you to have an idea, I was told the number, a very small number here in the cases between companies and workers here in the States, even less in Japan. In Brazil, it's 3 million per year. You need an army of lawyers to deal with all these legal cases that if you fire someone in Brazil, the next day, the guy goes to a court and says that he was fired without notice, without this or that, and then you have a case that will take months, years. It's a crazy system. And the new labor legislation indirectly will reduce the number of legal cases between workers and companies. So the private sector is very positive in relation to the reforms.
On this side, any questions? We have no takers here, so we go again to the left. No.
Yeah.
The gentleman right.
Yes, my name is Fernando Batista. I'm with Invest USC. I used to be with the World Bank, IFC. And I just have a few, while you were talking, I had some thoughts about how you spur domestic consumption in a realistic and good way right now in this transitional mode. Secondly, you mentioned in trade policy 3 countries, that is Korea, Japan, and Canada. And I was expecting to hear China as well. So I want to see your perspectives on the role that China could play.
¿Qué papel va a jugar? China. En la política.
If I understood what you asked about China and the relation with Brazil, China, as we see it, is this the question?
Why don't you try to make it
Well,
clear?
You know that China is our leading trading partner. Until 5 years ago, the United States was the leading trading partner to Brazil. Now it's China for 5 years now. and we have a growing relationship with China. Brazil is also a member of the BRICS group, which I think that nobody is paying too much attention, not even in Brazil. But I think that this is a very important thing that in the coming years, especially when Brazil grows again and has a reasonable foreign policy that we lost. That Brazil had no foreign policy in the last 15 years. Had what they thought it was a foreign policy, but it was not a foreign policy defending our interest. Defended interest from many countries, but not from our direct interest. And I think that these BRIC countries will have a say in not now. They will form a common agenda gradually. They are different countries. No, Brazil is not nuclear. All the others are nuclear. They are regional powers. With the exception of Brazil, Brazil has no regional policy, but we will eventually will have. The others have regional policies, and I think that when Brazil becomes normal again, BRICS will be one arm of Brazilian foreign, important arm of Brazilian foreign policy. So China, for us now, they are investing tremendously in Brazil. Since the United States companies are reluctant, they are investing in infrastructure and energy. They are occupying all the spaces there, but they have low profile. They are working. They open a new bank, new economic bank. They just approved a loan to develop renewable energy in Brazil. It's a huge thing, and this will eventually will be an important player. I think not now, but in 5-10 years, I think that we will hear more than you hear now about BRICS. And China will continue to be an important player to Brazil. Why? Because Brazil will continue to be a food supplier to China. Even if China grows less than 4, 5, 6%, Brazil, contrary to other Latin American countries, Brazil exports two important products for them: iron ore and soya. This is food and essential to steel. So what I'm trying to say is that the imports from China of these two products will continue. So Brazil will continue to be an important player in the coming years with China.
Very good. Any more questions? Yeah, the gentleman who was prior, and then you will go.
Thank you very
Go
much. I'm very glad to ask after this gentleman about China and Brazil, and especially your answer about the China and Brazil relationship. My name is James Gao from the Chinese Embassy. My question is about Brazil is as one of the very important emerging countries. So what do you think about the common challenges and opportunities, both for China and Brazil and the emerging countries as a whole? And China will host the BRICS summit this year in September. And I expect Brazil will host the summit in 2019, which is after your election. What do you expect to achieve in this September summit, as well as in 2019? Thank you.
Is a conference on what? In September? It's on what? BRICS. Well, they are developing. I'm going to China next month, beginning of next month, to take part in a meeting there on One Road, One Belt, which is a huge initiative, multi-billion dollars, covering I don't know how many countries, spreading by land, by sea, connections trade connections, cultural connections is a huge thing. I was invited to speak there, and I will learn what are the potentials, because it's an idea so far, but China is putting strong efforts, huge efforts to develop this idea that will increase the presence of China and the influence of China in that region, and we'll try to discuss how the Portuguese-speaking countries could be part of it or associate with it in the trade, in culture, or whatever.
Very promising. Yes, my dear friend.
Alec Watson from Hills and Company. I'm wondering, Mr. Ambassador, what you think the major obstacles are in Brazil that Brazil must overcome to integrate more fully with the global economy that you pointed out is an objective now. And similarly, what obstacles must be overcome to improve productivity of Brazilian firms in such a way that they can compete as effectively as possible in the global economy?
Well, I think that the most important question that we have to face is competitiveness. I think that Brazil is losing place. If you see the World Bank index about productivity, Brazil is losing places there every year. And this is due to what we call in Brazil the Brazilian cost. It's a question of taxation, price of energy, labor, interest rates, exchange rate, and this is being tackled now with these reforms. This is the beginning, as I said, the reforms are the beginning of a process that will have an impact on competitiveness. You know what's happening, to show how serious is the situation. A Brazilian company producing in Brazil is not competitive. The same company closes down in Brazil and moves to Paraguay. It is competitive and it is exported to the world. So the cost, that is not a question of productivity, or there are problems of productivity as well, but I think that the most serious problem that Brazil faces in the economy is the lack of competitiveness, because companies are suffering. Exchange rate may help a bit, but we need to have not 3.20 but 4 to be highly competitive. But this is artificial. We had in the past, and part of the problems that we face, we didn't get into details, were incentives that the government gave to companies there, tax exemptions, fiscal incentives, whatever, artificially, to help companies to be more competitive. And this finished. Brazil has no more possibility to continue to give tax exemptions or to give incentives, because there's no money. The Workers' Party broke the country, went bust. Now we are correct, and there is no money to do that. Even if the government wished, there is no money to do that. On the other side, I'm helping in the industrial area, helping one of the segments there, the IT area, that IT and automobile industries are challenged now by the WTO. Europe and Japan are questioning the industrial policies in the automobile and in the IT area, informatics. So this will have to change as well. Otherwise, we will be retaliated by the countries in the WTO. So the situation changed completely, and we will have to adjust the policies to improve competitiveness. This is one aspect. Productivity is an aspect of the competitiveness. It has to do more with companies. And then the question of labor force, this reform that is being approved, this will improve productivity. And they will have to resort to more technological advances, no? Because Brazil, with the crisis, the management of the crisis, companies are concentrated on the short term. We have to start thinking on a more longer term basis, and innovation, technology will increase productivity, as the labor reform will help to increase productivity as well. So these two problems are being discussed there. And some of the measures that are being tackled by the Congress in the reforms, especially the labor reform, will help to improve competitiveness and productivity.
One last question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Ambassador. Always good to hear you in this town again. My question is a political question.
Could you give us your name and affiliation?
Sorry, Luis Bittencourt from the Paris Center, National Defense University, and Georgetown University. Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned the processes ongoing against Lula. He was just heard by the judge in a highly celebrated momentum in Curitiba, and there's a lot of discussion about his futures. What in your scenario that you built about the next elections, what would be worse now? If Lula is put in jail because of the accusations in the process, and then becomes a sort of martyr in the movement, or if Lula is just let be free?
No, I don't think he will be in jail. I think he will be condemned. But so far, what the accusations against him, the two most important, and those who will be examined before, are the question of the flat in Guarujá and the farm, small farm in the interior of São Paulo. And this, if he's judged and condemned, he will be unable to present himself as a candidate. But this doesn't just, in my view, doesn't justify him in jail. You can have, according to our system, you can have social work, you can give other penalties. And I don't think for those two problems that it is justifiable to put him in jail. I don't think that this would be a solution, because there will be a huge reaction from public opinion. But I think that the judge there, the Moro, should take this in consideration, and when he decides what to do. I don't think that. I think that Lula will support Ciro Gomes. I think that the Workers' Party will have the traditional 25-30% in the country, but no more than that, because Lula was elected with the huge support of the middle class, and now the Workers' Party lost the middle class. If you go to São Paulo, Rio, and the rejection, Lula's rejection, according to the polls, is 65-70% rejection. So it's very difficult for him to get elected, but he can make trouble. He can, have the crowd after with him against the system, against other candidates. But But I think, as I said, that he will support Ciro or another candidate from the left. But given the changes in the country and the rejection the Workers' Party and himself have today, I think that it will be a surprise to me if they win the next election.
Thank you, Rubens. And thank you very much for having been with us this afternoon. Let's give a final round of applause to our speaker. Well deserved. Well deserved.